In today's fast-paced world, where sleep disorders are on the rise and blue light screens dominate our evenings, it's easy to believe that poor sleep is simply a symptom of modern life. But what if we told you that over 1,000 years ago, in the rugged landscapes of Viking-age Scandinavia, a society existed where people may have slept better than we do today? This might sound surprising, especially when we think of Vikings as fierce raiders, warriors, and explorers. Yet beneath their rugged exterior was a lifestyle perfectly in sync with nature's rhythms, one that modern science now believes supported some of the healthiest sleep in human history. While we chase an elusive ideal of 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, that very standard is a modern invention, a product of industrialization, rigid work hours, and artificial light. The Vikings, on the other hand, slept not by the clock, but by the sky. Their sleep was guided by the rising and setting of the sun, by the seasons, and by their deep relationship with the darkness of the north. This video explores the Viking approach to sleep, and why their habits might hold answers to the insomnia epidemic of the 21st century. Through archaeological findings, saga literature, and insights from modern sleep science, we'll uncover a world where rest was not a battle, but a natural, integrated part of daily life. From shared sleeping platforms to herbal sleep remedies, from bifurcated sleep schedules to deep darkness unmarred by LEDs, the Norse people lived a reality that modern sleep researchers now regard as the gold standard, without even trying. So, what made Viking sleep so effective? And more importantly, what can we learn from it? Let's begin our journey into the forgotten science of Viking sleep. Modern society has long believed that healthy sleep should come in one solid, uninterrupted block. The mythical 8 hours has become the gold standard for rest. We chase it with apps, sleep trackers, noise machines, and sleeping pills. But what if that belief is wrong, or at least incomplete? Historical evidence from across pre-industrial Europe, including from the Viking world, suggests that sleeping in one long stretch is not the natural human norm. In fact, for most of history, people likely slept in two distinct phases, with a waking period in between. This biphasic, or segmented sleep, may have been the default way humans rested, and the Vikings were no exception. To understand Viking sleep habits, we can start by examining their language and literature. In various Old Norse sagas, epic stories written centuries ago, there are curious references to two types of sleep. The terms Fyrstasvefn, first sleep, and Annarsvefn, second sleep, occasionally appear, pointing to a night divided into parts. In the Grettir Saga, for example, the hero Grettir is described waking up in the middle of the night to tend to chores before returning to bed. In Egil's Saga, characters are said to talk or work during the midnight hours before resuming their rest. These aren't isolated cases, they mirror what researchers have found across other medieval European texts, suggesting a universal sleep rhythm before the industrial age. The idea of segmented sleep is not just found in literature. It's backed by modern sleep research. Dr. Roger Kirch, a historian and author of the book At Day's Close, Night in Times Past, documented hundreds of references to first and second sleep in diaries, court records, and letters from pre-industrial societies. His work revealed that sleep was historically divided, and the middle-of-the-night waking period was not considered unusual or problematic. This waking period often lasted 1 to 2 hours, during which people might meditate, talk, read, write, have sex, or engage in light chores. It wasn't insomnia, it was expected. Modern experiments have confirmed this pattern. In one study, participants were placed in an environment without artificial light. After several nights, they began to naturally adopt a biphasic sleep pattern, sleeping for about 4 hours, waking for 1 to 2 hours, and then returning to sleep until morning. During the waking phase, their brains produced higher levels of prolactin, a hormone associated with calmness and relaxation. In other words, the body naturally settles into this rhythm when left to its own devices. Now, let's apply this knowledge to the Viking world. Imagine a Norse longhouse in 9th century Norway. It's deep winter, nights are long, stretching up to 16 hours in some regions. Artificial lighting is minimal. The family gathers around the hearthfire after dinner, talking, telling stories, perhaps sharing a drink. As the darkness fully settles, sometime around 7 or 8 p.m., they lie down together on shared wooden sleeping platforms, covered in straw, wool, and furs. After about 4 hours of sleep, around midnight many begin to stir. This isn't cause for concern, it's simply the midnight waking period, as natural to them as brushing one's teeth is to us. Some might add wood to the fire. Others might check the livestock. A few may sit in quiet conversation or reflect on the day. Couples might take this time for intimacy. Perhaps someone quietly prays or engages in a small ritual. Then, as the body begins to feel tired again, everyone drifts back into a second sleep, waking around dawn. This is not speculation. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements such as Jorvik, modern-day York, shows that longhouses had central hearths maintained throughout the night. Burn patterns in the hearths suggest they were tended at regular intervals, indicating nighttime activity. These findings match perfectly with the biphasic model. Segmented sleep worked for the Vikings because it matched the realities of their environment and biology. Extreme daylight variation. In winter, darkness can last 16 to 20 hours. Trying to sleep all the way through that would be nearly impossible. Biphasic sleep breaks up the night into manageable periods of rest and light activity. Temperature control. Adding fuel to the fire during the night helped keep the household warm in frigid conditions. Security. Waking during the night also served as an informal night watch. In uncertain times, someone would always be alert enough to hear danger approaching. Cognitive rest. The waking period allowed the mind to process thoughts in a reflective state, without the overstimulation that keeps modern minds racing. Even religious or cultural practices may have favored this rhythm. The in-between time, after first sleep and before second sleep, held symbolic meaning. It was a liminal space, a time between worlds, suitable for contemplation or spiritual activity. The decline of segmented sleep coincided with the rise of artificial lighting, mechanized work schedules, and the Industrial Revolution. With people needing to wake up early for factory shifts, and gas lamps and later electric light keeping streets and homes bright late into the night, sleep gradually became consolidated into a single block. We were taught to aim for 7 to 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep, a noble goal, but one that often clashes with our natural tendencies. When people wake up during the night today, they panic. They believe something is wrong. Ironically, this anxiety about sleep is often what causes insomnia, not the waking itself. The Vikings had no such concern. Waking up at midnight was normal. It was a moment to enjoy, not a failure of rest. So, what can we take from this? Firstly, we must realize that waking up in the night isn't necessarily a problem. For some, accepting this can be the first step toward better sleep. If you naturally wake up around the same time every night, and you don't feel stressed or tired during the day, you might be following a biologically normal pattern. Secondly, creating an environment more like that of our ancestors, less artificial light, quieter evenings, and minimal stimulation, can help support healthier sleep rhythms. Lastly, we might want to reframe how we think about rest. Instead of viewing it as a rigid 8-hour block to be completed perfectly, we could see it as a flexible cycle, adaptable to our bodies and seasons, just as the Vikings did. The Viking approach to segmented sleep wasn't based on science, it was simply how life worked before electricity. But now, with mounting research backing it up, their old ways are starting to look remarkably modern. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how the natural darkness of the Viking world created the perfect hormonal conditions for truly restorative rest. Stay with us. In our modern world, total darkness is a rare luxury. We live in homes bathed in LED lighting. Our cities glow into the sky. Even while sleeping, many of us are surrounded by blinking devices, night lights, and glowing alarm clocks. But 1,000 years ago, in the Viking world, true, uninterrupted darkness wasn't just normal, it was essential. As we continue exploring the forgotten wisdom of Viking sleep, we come to one of the most important, and perhaps most overlooked, elements of healthy rest, darkness itself. Let's journey into the long, winter nights of the Norse world, and uncover how this natural darkness created a perfect hormonal environment for deep, healing sleep. In Viking-age Scandinavia, Iceland, Greenland, and parts of the British Isles, communities lived without gas lamps, streetlights, or glowing screens. Their only sources of illumination were the fire in the hearth, the occasional oil lamp, or handmade candles, none of which could hold a flame, literally or figuratively, to modern lighting. Viking homes were built to preserve warmth, not invite sunlight. Longhouses had few or no windows. Openings were often sealed with wooden shutters or covered in translucent animal membranes or oiled cloth. At night, any remaining light would have come from embers in the hearth, which were typically banked low to conserve fuel. This resulted in sleeping environments of profound darkness, far darker than anything most people today experience, even with blackout curtains. For Viking sleepers, their eyes saw no artificial blue light, their skin wasn't exposed to glowing screens, and their brains could fully transition into night mode. Why does this matter? Because darkness is not just the absence of light, it's a biological signal, one that tells your brain it's time to rest. In the presence of true darkness, the brain's pineal gland produces melatonin, the hormone responsible for regulating our circadian rhythms, helping us fall asleep and stay asleep. Modern research has shown that even low levels of light can disrupt melatonin production. Exposure to blue-spectrum light from smartphones, tablets, TVs, and LED bulbs has been shown to delay melatonin release by hours, reduce total sleep time, and lead to more fragmented rest. In contrast, Viking homes offered an environment of complete light discipline. The dim, red-orange glow of firelight does not suppress melatonin the way blue light does. Their use of candles and lamps was both limited and inherently sleep-friendly. A study published in the Journal of Sleep Research found that when modern participants spent a week camping without artificial light, their sleep patterns naturally adjusted. They began to fall asleep earlier, woke up more refreshed, and produced 30% more melatonin. The Vikings lived their entire lives in this kind of setting. Scandinavia is known for its extreme variations in daylight, especially the further north one travels. In the depths of winter, daylight might last only 3 to 5 hours. Some regions, like parts of northern Norway or Iceland, plunge into near-total darkness for weeks at a time. In this environment, Vikings' sleep likely followed a natural expansion during the dark season. Sleep periods became longer, and the darkness served as a cue to rest deeply. Melatonin production in winter would have been sustained for 12 to 16 hours per day, an incredibly rare and sleep-enhancing condition by modern standards. Let's imagine a man named Leif, a coastal fisherman near what is now Bergen, Norway. In January, darkness would fall before 4 p.m. and not lift until nearly 9 a.m. With minimal light pollution, his home, lit only by embers and the occasional oil lamp, would be blanketed in deep darkness. His brain would begin producing melatonin as the sun set, preparing him for long, uninterrupted periods of sleep. This is the kind of hormonal environment modern sleep scientists attempt to recreate in sleep clinics. Of course, darkness was not always guaranteed. In summer, the Norse world experienced the midnight sun, especially in Iceland and far northern Scandinavia, where the sun barely dips below the horizon. How did Vikings sleep when night barely came? Archaeological evidence offers some answers. Excavations in Iceland and Scandinavia show that Viking homes made seasonal adjustments. Thick woolen curtains, heavy hangings, and turf-insulated walls were used to block out light, creating darkness artificially. Some sleeping spaces were tucked into deep corners of longhouses, or even built into turf walls to limit light exposure. In Egil's Saga, there are references to rearranging sleeping areas during the summer months, suggesting a cultural awareness of the need for darkness, even when the sky refused to cooperate. But the Vikings didn't just react to light, they understood its power on a symbolic and spiritual level. Their calendar was lunar-based, tracking moon phases and solstices with precision. They celebrated the winter solstice, or Yule, with great ritual significance, the return of the sun after the longest darkness. Some sagas and poems even hint at changes in behavior and sleep tied to lunar cycles. Full moons brought more activity or difficulty sleeping, while dark nights were favored for deeper rest. Modern studies support these observations, showing that even invisible lunar changes can influence REM sleep and sleep depth. It's likely that the Vikings, without knowing the precise hormonal science, still grasped the relationship between light, dark, and sleep, and structured their homes and habits accordingly. Today, most of us live in a world that never truly gets dark. Street lamps shine through our windows. Our phones glow late into the night. Even our sleep environments are often riddled with artificial light. This has serious consequences. Poor melatonin production is linked not just to bad sleep, but also to metabolic issues, immune suppression, and increased risk of mood disorders. Modern researchers now advise a return to darkness before bed, or at least dim red spectrum lighting. What the Vikings lived by default, we now must intentionally recreate. Here are some practical takeaways inspired by Vikings' sleep environments. Eliminate blue light at night. Use warm-toned bulbs in the evening. Avoid screens an hour before bed. Create true darkness. Use blackout curtains, cover any glowing lights, and remove devices from your room. Adjust seasonally. In summer, consider using eye masks or light-blocking curtains. In winter, embrace the longer sleep windows. Use light sparingly and intentionally. Treat light as the powerful biological signal that it is, not just decoration. And perhaps most importantly, honor the night. The Vikings didn't fear darkness. They lived in harmony with it. They adapted to its rhythms, and in doing so, gave their bodies exactly what they needed for deep, restorative rest. In our quest to conquer the night with technology, we may have lost something ancient and essential. The Vikings, without any modern science or tools, built their homes and structured their lives in a way that let natural sleep flourish. Darkness wasn't the enemy, it was the healer. In the next part of this series, we'll explore how the communal nature of Viking sleep, sharing spaces, warmth, and security, may have offered psychological and physical benefits that far surpass our isolated modern bedrooms. Join us as we continue to uncover the lost science of Viking sleep. In the modern world, we tend to treat sleep as a solitary ritual. Bedrooms are private sanctuaries, often behind locked doors, where silence and separation are the norm. We value space, privacy, and individuality, even in rest. But in the Viking Age, sleep looked very different. It was communal, shared, and deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. Across Viking settlements in Scandinavia, Iceland, the British Isles, and even as far as Greenland and Newfoundland, archaeological excavations consistently reveal the same pattern: the longhouse. These large rectangular structures were the heart of Viking life. At the center, a long hearth provided heat and light. Along the walls, raised wooden platforms served multiple purposes. There were seats during the day and beds at night. But these weren't beds for one. Entire households slept together in the same room, often on the same continuous platform. Parents, children, extended family, workers, and even guests might share this space. This kind of communal sleeping might seem foreign to us now, but for the Vikings, it was practical, social, and deeply comforting. In the bitter cold of a Scandinavian winter, body heat was a survival tool. Huddled together under furs and woolen blankets, Viking families shared warmth and shelter. The fire at the center would be tended during the night, its embers giving off just enough heat and light to keep the room warm without disrupting the dark stillness needed for sleep. The structure of these sleeping arrangements also reflected social order. The highest status members of the household, typically the master and mistress, would sleep closest to the fire, where it was warmest and most comfortable. Their section of the sleeping platform might be slightly raised or separated with a curtain. Children and servants would occupy other areas, ordered by both necessity and hierarchy. Yet despite these subtle distinctions, everyone shared the same space. There were no isolated rooms, no locked doors, and no artificial boundaries between people. Sleep was something done together. Beyond the obvious practical benefits, this kind of sleeping arrangement offered something more profound: emotional safety. Modern research into sleep psychology has shown that humans, as social animals, sleep better when they feel secure. For our ancestors, the presence of others was protection against predators, intruders, or natural threats. In Viking society, that security was literal. Many sagas describe moments when danger approaches at night, and it's a member of the household, waking during the midnight hours, who hears a noise and raises the alarm. Communal sleep served as a built-in security system. Someone was always close by, always listening. But the safety provided wasn't just physical, it was emotional. To sleep in the presence of trusted others is to rest with your guard lowered. Studies of traditional cultures around the world have shown that people in communal sleeping arrangements tend to fall asleep faster and report higher sleep satisfaction. Children especially benefit. In cultures where families sleep together, infants and young children cry less at night and develop stronger sleep associations. It's not hard to imagine a Viking child drifting to sleep next to a parent's steady breathing, the crackle of the fire in the background, wrapped in furs and stories. This closeness didn't eliminate the need for privacy entirely. The Vikings, like all people, found ways to create intimacy and personal space within their environment. Some longhouses show evidence of curtains or fabric dividers, which could be drawn to create semi-private zones within the shared sleeping area. Box beds, enclosed sleeping compartments made of wood, also appear in the archaeological record, especially among wealthier households. These could be closed with doors or shutters, offering a degree of seclusion when needed, especially for couples. Interestingly, the natural rhythm of Viking sleep, the biphasic pattern we explored earlier, also supported privacy. The midnight waking period often found family members awake at different times. Some might step away from the hearth to perform quiet tasks or tend to animals. Others might seek solitude, prayer, or intimate conversation. This built-in division of the night allowed for moments of quiet privacy even within a communal setting. The shared sleeping space also created a powerful social bond. Much like communal meals or collective labor, sleeping together reinforced family cohesion. It built trust, shared experience, and familiarity. This might be part of why exile or outlawry in Viking society was so severe, not only a legal punishment but a social and emotional one. To be cast out from the household was to lose the warmth and comfort of shared sleep. In some sagas, characters reflect on the loneliness of sleeping alone while in exile. The implication is clear: to sleep together was to belong. The seasonal shifts of the Viking world also influenced these communal arrangements. In the depths of winter, longhouses were full, every corner used for warmth and protection. But in summer, when days were long and the nights mild, people sometimes slept outside or in outbuildings. The communal structure was flexible, adapting to the climate and the needs of the group. Still, the core value remained: sleep was a shared, social experience. Over time, this communal approach to sleep began to erode. As Christianity spread through Scandinavia, architectural styles shifted. New moral frameworks emphasized personal privacy, modesty, and separation. Wealthier households began to construct separate chambers, a trend that accelerated in the medieval and Renaissance periods. Eventually, the concept of individual bedrooms took hold. What was once a shared human experience became a private affair. Today, our bedrooms often symbolize independence, control, and personal space. But in doing so, we may have lost something ancient and important. The Vikings didn't worry about being alone at night. They slept in warmth, surrounded by family and community. Their minds were likely freer from nighttime anxieties, and their bodies comforted by the presence of others. Modern science is just beginning to rediscover the power of social sleep. From studies on co-sleeping and child development to emerging research on the psychological benefits of touch and proximity, it's becoming clear that our ancestors may have had it right. The Viking approach wasn't primitive, it was sophisticated. It combined environmental adaptation, social cohesion, and an intuitive understanding of what humans need to rest deeply. In our next chapter, we'll explore the physical environments in even greater detail: how Viking beds, furs, straw mattresses, and ergonomic designs created a sleep surface that rivals, or even outperforms, many modern mattresses. As we continue this journey through Viking sleep, one thing becomes increasingly clear: these ancient people, so often remembered for war and conquest, may have achieved something modern humans desperately seek: deep, restorative, natural sleep. When we think of comfortable sleep, we often picture plush mattresses, memory foam, and ergonomic pillows designed with cutting-edge materials. But 1,000 years before modern sleep science, the Vikings had already built something remarkably effective. Their bedding may have lacked modern branding, but in structure, material, and function, Viking sleeping arrangements offered benefits that many of us still chase today. Across Viking settlements, from rural farmsteads to coastal outposts, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of longhouses, the central dwelling of Norse life. In these homes, sleeping arrangements were both practical and surprisingly sophisticated. At first glance, the raised wooden platforms lining the walls of longhouses might seem crude. But closer study reveals a structure carefully designed for comfort, hygiene, and support. These platforms, usually built about 40 to 60 centimeters off the ground, were raised for a reason. The elevation protected sleepers from the cold, damp earth, promoted airflow beneath the bedding, and made space for storage. The base was typically constructed from flat wooden planks or split logs, often slightly angled so the head end was raised, a detail that aligns with modern recommendations for improving circulation and reducing acid reflux during sleep. The sleeping platform was the foundation, but what went on top of it is even more fascinating. Viking bedding followed a layered design, using natural, locally available materials to create a surface that was firm yet responsive, breathable yet insulating, offering an experience surprisingly close to what high-end orthopedic mattresses aim to replicate today. The base layer was usually straw or hay, selected for softness and changed regularly. At multiple Viking archaeological sites, including in Iceland and Denmark, remnants of straw mattresses have been discovered. These straw beds were far from primitive. The straw provided a flexible, springy base that supported body weight while allowing airflow, minimizing the heat retention and pressure points that plague many modern beds. Above the straw, Vikings layered woolen textiles, typically made from coarse wool cloth like wanmal. These fabrics added padding and prevented the straw from poking through. Wool, naturally insulating and moisture wicking, helped regulate body temperature during the night. Its lanolin content also gave it antibacterial properties, making it more hygienic than many synthetic bedding materials today. For those of higher status, the topmost layer might include animal furs, soft, warm, and luxurious. Excavations at elite Viking sites, such as the Oseberg ship burial in Norway, have revealed beds covered in bear, fox, or sheepskins. These furs offered both thermal insulation and tactile comfort, adapting to body temperature and providing a soothing surface against the skin. Even in midwinter, when nights could drop well below freezing, these natural materials maintained a stable, sleep microclimate, an important factor in promoting deep, uninterrupted sleep. Viking pillows also differed significantly from modern designs. Instead of soft, fluffy pillows, Norse sleepers typically used firm headrests. Some consisted of leather pouches stuffed with wool, moss, or feathers. Others may have been small wooden head blocks, similar to those found in other traditional cultures. While they may seem uncomfortable by today's standards, firmer head support actually promotes better cervical alignment, reducing neck strain and improving breathing during sleep, benefits that sleep researchers now endorse. The design of Viking beds extended beyond the individual. Since most families slept communally, the structure of the sleeping platform had to accommodate multiple bodies. This collective weight distribution created natural depressions, allowing the surface to conform slightly to body contours without the need for specialized foams or springs. It's a principle seen today in some high-end, zone support mattresses, where firmness varies depending on pressure. What's more, these shared beds enhanced thermal regulation. Body heat was conserved across multiple sleepers, reducing the need for thick, restrictive layers. Modern research into co-sleeping shows that shared sleep environments can stabilize body temperature and reduce sleep disturbances, a natural advantage the Vikings benefited from nightly. Another overlooked strength of Viking bedding was its seasonal adaptability. Evidence from Viking longhouses indicates that bedding materials were adjusted throughout the year. In winter, thicker straw layers, denser wool, and additional furs were added for warmth. In summer, lighter layers were used, and beds were sometimes moved to better ventilated parts of the house. This flexible approach to bedding matches what modern sleep scientists now recommend, adapting sleep environments to seasonal temperature shifts, rather than trying to maintain a constant indoor climate year-round. Consider Astrid, the wife of a prosperous farmer in southern Norway. After a long day of labor, she would return to her sleeping platform, raised above the cold floor, padded with fresh rye straw, covered in tightly woven wool cloth, and topped with several thick sheep skins. As she lay down beside her children and husband, their shared warmth, the soft rustle of straw, and the faint smell of pine and smoke would combine into a natural sedative. No mattress advertisements. No orthopedic claims. Just practical comfort, rooted in centuries of intuition and adaptation. Modern sleep research increasingly supports the ergonomic benefits of the Viking bed. Studies have shown that firm but responsive surfaces are often better for spinal alignment than soft, overly plush mattresses. They prevent the spine from sagging and help maintain neutral posture throughout the night. Many mattress companies today are rediscovering the value of natural materials like wool and latex, citing their breathability, resilience, and temperature control, all features Viking beds delivered with straw, wool, and fur. And unlike many modern beds, Viking bedding was renewable and biodegradable. Straw was changed seasonally. Wool and furs could be aired, brushed, or replaced as needed. This regular maintenance reduced the buildup of dust mites and allergens, common contributors to poor sleep and respiratory issues in modern bedrooms. Even the act of building and maintaining a Viking bed likely contributed to a more mindful relationship with sleep. The materials were gathered from one's surroundings, assembled by hand, and cared for with seasonal rituals. In a world where sleep is often treated as a chore or a problem to be solved, the Viking approach treated sleep as a natural outcome of daily living. It was respected, nurtured, and understood in physical terms. Over time, as homes became more compartmentalized and industrialized bedding emerged, many of these natural sleep principles were lost. Straw mattresses gave way to cotton, then to synthetic foam. Standardized bed sizes and heights replaced adaptable shared platforms. And with these changes, we may have traded biological alignment for convenience. The Viking bed, in all its simplicity, was anything but crude. It was a finely tuned sleep system built from the earth, resilient, ergonomic, and remarkably effective. It reflected an understanding of the body, the seasons, and the social structure of the household. In many ways, it was a more holistic approach than what most modern sleepers experience today. As we continue exploring the Viking sleep ecosystem, the picture becomes clearer. From their sleeping patterns and lighting environment to their social and physical sleep spaces, the Norse people unknowingly crafted a blueprint for healthy, restorative rest, one that still speaks to us today. In the next part of this series, we'll turn our attention to an often overlooked detail: the Viking use of herbal remedies and natural sleep aids, how healers in Viking villages harnessed plants and rituals to calm the mind and soothe the body into rest. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover the secrets of the most well-rested warriors in history. While the Viking Age is best remembered for its warriors and seafarers, there was another side to Norse society, one grounded in tradition, natural knowledge, and healing. Among the most overlooked contributors to Viking health and well-being were their herbalists and healers. These individuals, often women, preserved a rich tradition of plant-based medicine passed down through generations. And when it came to sleep, their remedies were both sophisticated and surprisingly effective. Before the rise of modern pharmacology, people relied on the natural world to manage everything from pain to anxiety to restlessness. In the Viking world, this knowledge was encoded not only in practice, but in stories, rituals, and seasonal rhythms. When sleep did not come easily, whether due to illness, stress, or seasonal disturbances, Viking healers turned to a growing arsenal of herbal sleep aids that rival many of today's natural remedies. Archaeological excavations across Norse settlements have unearthed a surprising amount of evidence pointing to medicinal plant use. In places like Jorvik, modern-day York, Hedeby, and settlements in Norway and Iceland, researchers have found preserved seeds, pollen traces, and plant residues inside vessels and refuse pits. Many of these plants are known today for their calming, sedative, or anxiolytic properties. One of the most widely documented Viking sleep aids was valerian, Valeriana officinalis. Native to Europe and well established by the Viking Age, valerian root contains compounds that interact with GABA receptors in the brain, similar to how some modern anti-anxiety medications work. Valerian helps reduce the time it takes to fall asleep, increases sleep depth, and promotes a sense of relaxation. Its earthy smell and bitter taste were likely masked with honey or fermented liquids. For the Norse, it was both medicine and ritual. Another key player in the Viking sleep toolkit was hops, Humulus lupulus. Best known today as a core ingredient in beer, hops were also recognized for their calming effects. The Vikings brewed ale not only for celebration, but occasionally for therapeutic purposes. Hops contain methylbutanol, a compound that has been shown to reduce activity in the central nervous system. Combined with valerian, as is common in many modern herbal sleep blends, hops would have gently guided the body into rest. Linden flowers, Tilia spp, known in Old Norse as lin, were another calming agent. These delicate blooms produce a mild sedative effect and have traditionally been used to treat nervous tension, headaches, and sleep disturbances. Archaeological pollen evidence from Viking-age domestic waste sites suggests they were harvested and stored, likely brewed into infusions or teas consumed before bed. Chamomile, Matricaria chamomilla, though not native to Scandinavia, was likely introduced through trade routes reaching into continental Europe. Its calming flavonoid compounds, particularly apigenin, make it one of the most enduring sleep aids across cultures. Though archaeological evidence for chamomile in Viking homes is limited, its presence in early medieval medical texts from northern Europe makes it a plausible part of the Norse pharmacopoeia. Among the more exotic but possible entries in the Viking herbal tradition is lavender, Lavandula angustifolia. While not native to the northern climate, lavender was cultivated further south and may have been traded along with other rare herbs and spices. Dried lavender flowers placed in sleeping areas or steeped in warm infusions would have offered calming effects. Modern research shows that lavender's scent alone can reduce heart rate and blood pressure, promoting deeper, more restorative sleep. How did the Vikings use these herbs? Based on literary accounts, archaeological finds, and comparisons with contemporary folk traditions, several methods of preparation emerge. The most common was likely the infusion, a strong herbal tea brewed with freshly picked or dried leaves, flowers, or roots. Special clay or ceramic vessels found near sleeping areas may have been used for brewing or storing such nighttime drinks. Another method was alcohol extraction, what we now call a tincture. The Vikings were skilled brewers, and small quantities of alcohol were used to extract medicinal compounds from herbs. These preparations would have been taken in small doses, sometimes mixed with honey to soften the bitterness of roots like valerian. Aromatic rituals also played a role. Certain herbs, especially lavender and hops, may have been dried and burned as part of a sleep ritual. The calming scent would have helped set a tranquil mood, especially during the reflective midnight wake period typical of biphasic sleep. Archaeological evidence of special fire bowls and scent containers found near hearths suggests that such practices were more than occasional. There is also reason to believe that Vikings used herbal pillows, small sacks of cloth filled with dried calming herbs and placed under or near the head. Though physical evidence of this is difficult to preserve archaeologically, similar practices exist in later Scandinavian folk traditions, where sleep pillows were stuffed with calming flowers and grasses. Just as important as the herbs themselves was the ritual of administration. Viking healing was not separated from spirituality. Remedies were often accompanied by chants, prayers, or symbolic acts. These weren't simply superstitions, they added psychological power to the treatment. Modern science now acknowledges the placebo effect as a major factor in the effectiveness of many natural remedies. When administered with intention and belief, even mild sedatives can produce significant improvements in sleep quality. Seasonality also played an important role in herbal use. During the dark winter months, when sleep came more easily due to prolonged darkness, lighter herbs like linden and chamomile might have been preferred. In summer, When the midnight sun disrupted circadian rhythms, stronger sedatives like valerian and hops would have been more valuable. Archaeological remains of dried plant storage and harvesting tools suggest that Vikings preserved herbs strategically, drying and storing them in preparation for different seasonal needs. The Viking herbal approach was, in many ways, more balanced than our modern dependence on pharmaceuticals. Their remedies were non-addictive, multifunctional, and adapted to individual and environmental needs. While the effects of valerian or hops may be milder than sleeping pills today, they come without the risks of dependency, withdrawal, or rebound insomnia. They were used not to overpower the body into unconsciousness, but to gently guide it toward rest. Let's imagine a healer named Thora in a village in what is now Denmark. A young man, restless from grief or stress, comes to her for help. She gathers dried valerian root, harvested during the previous summer's peak potency. She combines it with hops and a spoonful of honey in a clay mug, pours hot water, and lets the mixture steep. As she hands him the tea, she whispers words of calm, perhaps a short prayer to the gods for peaceful dreams. The treatment is not only botanical, it's emotional, spiritual, and social. It's not just about knocking someone out, it's about helping them find their way back to rest. In this way, the Vikings' sleep environment wasn't just physical or behavioral, it was holistic. Herbs were one part of a larger system that included natural darkness, community, bedding, temperature, and attitude. Sleep was not forced, it was supported. Today, as interest in natural remedies grows, many of the herbs once used by Vikings have made a comeback. Valerian, hops, chamomile, and lavender now appear in sleep teas, supplements, oils, and sprays. But too often, we treat them as isolated solutions to complex problems. The Vikings remind us that these tools work best not alone, but as part of a broader sleep ecology, one rooted in rhythm, ritual, and respect for the natural world. In our next chapter, we'll explore one final, and critical, aspect of Viking sleep, their daily movement and physical exertion, and how a life of purposeful activity created the kind of physical fatigue that invites the deepest and most restorative rest. We often hear that exercise helps with sleep, and science confirms it. But in the modern world, where physical movement is frequently confined to 30-minute gym sessions or weekend jogs, we rarely experience the kind of all-day exertion that once defined human life. To understand why the Vikings may have been some of the best sleepers in history, we must look at how their bodies moved, not in isolated bursts, but as part of a continuous, purposeful lifestyle. In Viking-age Scandinavia, physical activity wasn't something people carved time out for, it was inseparable from daily survival. Farming, fishing, crafting, construction, travel, defense, every element of Viking life required vigorous, full-body effort. Unlike today's sedentary routines punctuated by short workouts, the Norse lived in a world where movement was constant, varied, and integrated into the rhythm of day and night. Archaeological studies of Viking skeletal remains tell a vivid story. The bones of Viking men often display strong muscle attachment points in the shoulders, arms, and upper back, evidence of heavy lifting, rowing, and tool use. Women's remains frequently show similar muscular development in the arms and spine, linked to grinding grain, weaving, and other forms of repetitive, weight-bearing labor. Even among higher-status individuals buried with jewelry or weapons, bone density and where patterns suggest regular exertion was a feature of life, not just labor. This physical activity created more than just strength, it created the perfect biological conditions for sleep readiness. When we move our bodies throughout the day, especially in natural light and fresh air, we help regulate our circadian rhythm. The body recognizes the pattern: work in the light, rest in the dark. As daylight fades, body temperature begins to fall, melatonin production rises, and the fatigued muscles prepare for recovery. The result? Sleep that is not only easier to fall into but deeper and more efficient. Modern sleep research confirms this relationship. Studies show that moderate to high levels of physical activity improve sleep efficiency, increase time spent in slow-wave sleep, and shorten the time it takes to fall asleep. In particular, activities that combine endurance and strength, such as rowing or woodcutting, are associated with improved sleep quality. These were precisely the kinds of activities Vikings performed daily. Consider the life of a Viking shipbuilder like Gunnar, working near the fjords of Norway. His day would begin at dawn. He'd walk to the workshop, split logs with hand tools, haul timbers into position, and chisel wood with precision. There were no power tools, only muscle, repetition, and rhythm. Every movement expended energy. Every task engaged multiple muscle groups. By sunset, his body was thoroughly worked, not in the modern sense of post-gym soreness, but in a complete, systemic fatigue. His sleep wasn't earned through sleep aids or stress management techniques. It was the natural response to a physically demanding day. But it wasn't just the intensity of Viking movement that mattered. It was also the timing. Physical activity was front-loaded into the day. Most labor occurred between sunrise and early evening. As darkness approached, activity naturally slowed. This tapering matched the body's biological rhythm. Cortisol levels decline, melatonin begins to rise, and the body prepares for rest. The Vikings didn't exercise late at night or keep busy under artificial lights. Their evenings were for eating, storytelling, reflection, or the midnight wake period between their two sleep phases, quiet, gentle activities that further promoted relaxation. This daytime activity also had another important effect: sunlight exposure. The vast majority of Viking labor took place outdoors, even in cold or cloudy weather. This meant regular exposure to natural light, which is a powerful regulator of the sleep-wake cycle. Morning and midday light, in particular, helps synchronize the circadian rhythm and improve nighttime melatonin production. Today, people are often advised to take early morning walks for this very reason, a practice the Vikings fulfilled simply by living. The nature of Viking activity also contributed to a form of mind-body alignment that is increasingly rare today. Their work was tangible, purposeful, and often done in cooperation with others. Whether building a house, preparing a feast, rowing a ship, or mending tools, each action had visible outcomes and social meaning. Modern research suggests that meaningful physical activity, as opposed to mindless or purely aesthetic exercise, enhances mental health and sleep quality. This is in part because purposeful labor reduces cognitive rumination, one of the leading causes of modern insomnia. There is another key difference between modern and Viking exertion: the lack of prolonged mental overstimulation. While Vikings undoubtedly experienced stress, harsh winters, illness, danger, it was typically physical or situational rather than chronic psychological stress. They weren't bombarded by notifications, work emails, or existential media cycles. Their fatigue was muscular, not mental. And unlike modern fatigue, which often leaves the body tired but the mind racing, Viking fatigue primed both the body and mind for synchronized rest. Vikings also understood the value of recovery. The Norse calendar included periods of feasting, fasting, and seasonal adjustment. During the deep winter months, when travel and farming slowed, households focused on indoor tasks, storytelling, and ritual. Physical intensity lessened, offering the body a chance to recuperate. There was also a cultural awareness of moderation, reflected in the sayings of the Havamál, a collection of Old Norse wisdom. These verses often warned against both excess and laziness, promoting a sustainable rhythm of activity and rest. Bathing and thermal practices further supported recovery. Archaeological finds suggest that Viking communities used bathhouses and hot springs for relaxation and hygiene. Warm bathing before bed, a practice supported by modern sleep research, helps lower core body temperature afterward, a signal that cues the body towards sleep readiness. Combined with physical exhaustion, it's easy to see how this lifestyle created the conditions for natural, drug-free, deeply restorative sleep. Even Viking social practices promoted healthier sleep through activity. Much of their labor was done communally. Whether rowing a longship, working a field, or building a hall, tasks were shared. This constant interaction provided social connectedness, another proven enhancer of sleep quality. Modern studies show that individuals with strong social bonds sleep better, wake less often, and report fewer stress dreams. For the Vikings, physical work wasn't isolated, it was embedded in the tribe, the household, the rhythm of life. It's important to note that Viking exertion wasn't about athleticism or fitness in the modern sense. It wasn't about personal bests, calorie tracking, or gym memberships. It was simply life. They worked, moved, carried, climbed, and hauled not to get better sleep, but because survival required it. The improved sleep was a byproduct of alignment with biology, season, and necessity. Today, as we navigate increasingly sedentary routines and digital distractions, we are reminded of what the Vikings may have understood intuitively: the body must earn its rest. Not through punishment or exhaustion, but through daily movement, meaningful labor, and the gentle taper of activity as night falls. In the final part of our series, we will turn to the heart of what held all of this together: the Viking mindset. How did their attitudes toward sleep, anxiety, purpose, and dreams create a psychological environment that welcomed sleep, not as an obligation but as a gift? Join us as we conclude the Viking sleep journey with perhaps the most powerful insight of all: not how they slept, but why they slept well. Sleep is not just a biological act, it is a deeply psychological experience. In today's world, many people struggle to fall asleep not because they're physically uncomfortable, but because their minds are overloaded. Anxiety, guilt, stress, racing thoughts, fear of not sleeping, these intrusions turn bedtime into a battleground. But the Vikings, for all their hardships, seemed to approach sleep differently. Their relationship with rest was not one of control, but of acceptance, purpose, and balance. The final piece in understanding why Viking sleep may have been among the most effective in history lies not in their beds, herbs, or routines, but in their mindset. At the heart of Norse culture was a belief system that prized courage, honor, and self-knowledge. The world was seen as both unpredictable and meaningful. Fate, or WYRD, was an ever-present concept. It represented the idea that much of life was out of one's hands, that destiny wove its thread through every action. But this wasn't fatalism in the modern, hopeless sense. Instead, it gave people psychological release from the need to control everything. This mindset shaped how Vikings handled stress and uncertainty, two major culprits in modern sleep disruption. Today, people often lie awake worrying about things they can't control. But for the Norse, once action had been taken, the rest was left to fate. They did not waste precious sleep fighting battles in their minds they could not fight in the world. This deeply rooted psychological posture, one of acceptance without passivity, is something that modern cognitive behavioral therapy now encourages. Let go of what cannot be changed, and rest. The Handwoven, a collection of Old Norse proverbs and wisdom verses, contains many insights into this balanced view of life. One verse warns against staying awake all night with worry. The unwise man is awake all night, and ponders everything over. When morning comes he is weary in mind, and all is a burden as ever. This is strikingly similar to what sleep psychologists now teach, that rumination, the act of cycling through thoughts without resolution, is destructive to sleep and mental health alike. Instead, the Viking attitude was one of measured action and intentional rest. Sleep was respected, but not fetishized. It was not a competition or a performance metric, nor was it viewed as laziness. Rest had a place in the cycle of life. A man who slept well and rose early was considered wise and capable. A man who stayed awake all night, overthinking, was seen as misguided, not heroic. Their stories reinforced this. In sagas and mythologies, heroes were shown to rest when needed. They healed in sleep. They dreamed with meaning. Sleep was not weakness, it was restoration, preparation for what came next. Even Odin, the Allfather, was described as entering deep states of rest to gain visions or wisdom. This imbued sleep with symbolic depth rather than utilitarian shame. There's also a strong possibility that dreams were seen as spiritually meaningful rather than simply chaotic brain noise. Dreams in Viking literature are often prophetic or emotionally revealing. They're taken seriously. This cultural respect for dreams could have created an atmosphere in which sleep was welcomed, not resisted. Today, many people fear dreams, particularly nightmares, as signs of disturbance or mental illness. The Vikings may have viewed them as messages or metaphors, not problems. Such a perspective relieves another major source of sleep anxiety: the fear of what happens when we're unconscious. If sleep is a bridge to meaning, not a place of fear, the mind relaxes. Fear of sleep, the loss of control, the vulnerability, disappears when sleep is viewed not as a void, but as a space for connection, healing, and restoration. Their relationship to community also shapes sleep psychology. As we saw in earlier chapters, the Vikings didn't sleep alone. They were surrounded by family, kin, and trusted companions. This physical closeness helped reduce psychological vigilance. In modern terms, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, can stay more active when people feel alone or unsafe. Shared sleeping spaces likely calm this system, allowing for deeper sleep and fewer nighttime arousals. Today, many people sleep isolated, both physically and emotionally. The modern emphasis on privacy, while valuable, can also breed quiet loneliness, especially at night, when the mind seeks safety and the body craves warmth. The Viking model was more communal, and this may have fostered the sense of emotional grounding that allowed people to fall asleep more easily and sleep more deeply. Even the rituals that accompanied Viking sleep helped reinforce a healthy mindset. Evening storytelling was not just entertainment, it was a form of mental decompression. Gathered around the hearth, families would listen to tales of gods, ancestors, moral choices, or distant adventures. These stories often had clear resolutions and moral lessons. They helped organize thought and emotion. In modern terms, this is called cognitive offloading, creating a gentle, structured pathway from wakefulness to sleep. Passive listening, reflective storytelling, and soothing narrative engagement all help the mind unwind from daily stress. Compare this with how many people spend their evenings today, scrolling through rapidly changing social media content, absorbing conflicting news, and engaging in interactive digital environments that stimulate the brain rather than calm it. The Viking method, grounded in slow rhythm and shared experience, offered a natural transition into rest. Another critical psychological factor was moral clarity. Norse culture placed great emphasis on honor, loyalty, and straightforwardness. Dishonorable actions were not only socially damaging, they created personal unrest. In several sagas, characters who act deceitfully or violate social norms experience sleeplessness and distress until their issues are resolved. This highlights a belief that inner conflict disrupts sleep, a belief supported by modern research. Studies in sleep medicine have found that people with unresolved guilt or moral distress often experience fragmented sleep, nightmares, and poor recovery. Conversely, those who feel aligned with their values, who act with consistency and integrity, tend to sleep better. Viking culture reinforced this daily. To sleep well, one had to live well. Not perfectly, but honestly, bravely, and with a sense of personal responsibility. The seasonal worldview of the Vikings also played a role. They were attuned to cycles of light and dark, life and death, silence and celebration. They knew that not all seasons were the same. Winter required more rest. Summer brought longer days. Feast and famine alternated. In this worldview, sleep was part of a natural rhythm, not a rigid schedule. There was no shame in sleeping longer in winter or rising earlier in summer. They let the body follow the world's turning, rather than force the world to match the body's alarm clock. This cyclical mindset is now making a comeback in modern chronobiology, the science of how time and biology interact. Scientists now understand that forcing a single sleep schedule year-round can be harmful. Our bodies crave rhythm, but also flexibility, something the Vikings intuitively understood. In the end, Viking sleep wasn't perfect because they tried harder. It was effective because it was integrated into a lifestyle aligned with human nature. From psychological acceptance to social structure, from spiritual views to evening rituals, they created a mental environment of rest. Today, we can't return to the Viking world. But we can learn from its mindset. Let go of sleep performance. Welcome rest. Embrace rhythm. Seek community. Tell stories. Live with courage and resolve. And when the day ends, allow the night to come, not as a problem to fix, but as a place to return home to. Sleep, for the Vikings, wasn't something to achieve. It was something that arrived, when the fire dimmed, when the stories ended, and when the mind was finally quiet. As we reach the final chapter of our exploration into Viking sleep, one thing becomes clear: the Norse people of the Viking Age did not sleep well by accident. They slept well because nearly every aspect of their lives, whether intentional or instinctive, was aligned with the natural needs of the human body and mind. Their rest was not hacked or optimized in the modern sense. It was supported, protected, and embraced by the structure of their world. Modern sleep science, for all its advances, is beginning to rediscover what the Vikings lived intuitively: that sleep is not a singular event, but an ecosystem. It is the outcome of dozens of interlocking factors: light, food, movement, temperature, community, emotion, belief. And when these factors are balanced, sleep becomes effortless. The Vikings achieved this balance through a combination of environmental harmony and cultural wisdom. Their homes were dark when they needed to be. Their meals were timed with the sun. Their work was physical and purposeful. Their relationships were embedded in daily life. Their minds were not saturated with artificial stimulation or abstract stress. They lived in rhythm, with the land, with the seasons, and with themselves. Let's reflect on some of the key components of this ancient sleep ecosystem. First, the segmented sleep pattern that dominated Viking nights allowed their bodies to follow natural circadian cues. Instead of forcing themselves to sleep for one continuous 8-hour block, they slept in 2 phases, divided by a quiet, purposeful waking period. This pattern, now backed by historical and scientific evidence, offered benefits that modern sleepers may find liberating. It reduced pressure to fall asleep quickly and reframed nighttime wakefulness not as failure, but as normal variation. In a society where many now fear waking in the night, the Viking model offers reassurance and freedom. Second, the darkness of their sleep environment was profound and uninterrupted. Without electric lighting or screens, the Viking body could produce melatonin naturally and fully. The red-orange spectrum of firelight created minimal disruption. Heavy curtains, windowless dwellings, and seasonal sleep adjustments allowed for complete immersion in darkness, a condition modern sleep labs try to recreate, often with difficulty. Today, most of us live in perpetual twilight. Light seeps under doors, glows from electronics, or leaks through city windows. The Viking night, by contrast, was clean and clear, a sanctuary for sleep. Third, the communal nature of Vikings' sleep fostered emotional safety and thermoregulation. While today's bedrooms isolate us from others, the Norse longhouse gathered families together. Children, elders, workers, and travelers shared platforms and furs, building warmth and trust. This closeness soothed the nervous system, stabilized temperature, and created a constant, subtle sense of belonging. Modern research now confirms what they likely felt: sleep is deeper when we feel protected. And protection is strongest when shared. Fourth, their natural bedding materials, wood, straw, wool, and fur, provided ergonomic support and breathability. These sleep surfaces conformed to the body's needs without synthetic foams or memory gels. Straw allowed for air circulation. Wool regulated temperature and resisted microbes. Furs insulated without overheating. Even their headrests, firm and practical, supported cervical alignment better than many modern pillows. And they refreshed these materials regularly, reducing allergens and preserving hygiene. Fifth, the Vikings used herbal sleep aids as gentle tools, not as crutches. Valerian, hops, linden, and chamomile were applied with knowledge and care, often accompanied by ritual. The remedies were part of a broader context, paired with natural sleep conditions and trusted social frameworks. Their use was seasonal, purposeful, and integrated, not isolated from the rest of life. Unlike modern dependency on sedatives, which can disrupt sleep architecture and cause long-term harm, Viking sleep aids helped guide the body, not override it. Sixth, their diet and meal timing played a major role. Vikings ate earlier in the evening, giving their bodies time to digest before bed. Their diets were rich in sleep-supportive nutrients: omega-3s from fish, tryptophan from protein, magnesium from grains, and probiotics from fermented foods. These meals didn't spike blood sugar or stress the digestive system during sleep. Instead, they primed the body for rest, stable, fueled, and satisfied. In a world where late-night snacking and caffeine disrupt the delicate balance of metabolism and circadian rhythm, the Viking pattern feels refreshingly aligned. Seventh, and perhaps most importantly, their physical exertion created real, whole-body fatigue. A day in Viking life meant hauling, lifting, rowing, weaving, chopping, carving, grinding. It was exercise without a gym, movement without a plan. Their labor was outdoors, in daylight, and seasonal. It engaged the body and focused the mind. When night fell, sleep was not a negotiation, it was a necessity. Their bodies didn't need to be persuaded to rest, they demanded it. And rest came naturally. Finally, their mindset, stoic, ritualized, communal, and accepting, shaped sleep at its core. They didn't obsess over sleep quality or fear being tired. They didn't suffer from the modern performance anxiety around rest. If they woke in the night, they rose, tended to the hearth, spoke softly, and returned to bed. If dreams came, they listened. If they felt guilt or unrest, they addressed it with action. Their approach to sleep was woven into how they approached life, with a combination of courage, moderation, and surrender. All of this suggests a provocative truth: the best sleep does not come from focusing on sleep. It comes from living in a way that invites it. This is the central paradox of Viking rest. They did not optimize sleep, they optimized life. Sleep followed. So where does this leave us in the modern world? We cannot live exactly as they did. Our cities don't go dark. Our work is often sedentary and artificial. Our food is processed. Our evenings are fragmented by screens. But we can still learn from the principles beneath Viking rest. We can respect darkness, by dimming our homes at night, banning screens from the bedroom, or using warm lighting to signal rest. We can allow for biphasic rhythms, by letting go of the rigid belief in a single, unbroken sleep block and giving ourselves grace for natural waking periods. We can reclaim physical movement, by walking more, working with our hands, and spending time in daylight. We can eat with intention, earlier in the evening, with foods that support rest, not stimulate wakefulness. We can gather our families, by restoring bedtime rituals, storytelling, or simply sitting together before bed. We can accept imperfection, knowing that one bad night is not a failure, and that sleep is a tide, not a switch. Most of all, we can shift our mindset, from control to invitation, from fear to rhythm. The Vikings have shown us that sleep, when supported by life's natural structures, becomes something effortless. A return, not a fight. A restoration, not an escape. In a world that often treats sleep as an obstacle or a weakness, the Norse remind us that rest is a form of strength. Let us sleep not like machines, but like people of the earth. Like farmers, explorers, builders, and dreamers. Let us sleep, if we're wise, like the Vikings. Throughout this journey into the sleep of the Viking Age, we've uncovered a forgotten chapter in human history. One not written in battles or sagas, but in silence, stillness, and slumber. In a time before electricity, before clocks, before sleep-tracking apps and blackout curtains, the Vikings slept under the stars and by the fire. And, as modern research increasingly suggests, they may have done so better than we do now. The question we now face is not just what the Vikings did, but what we, as modern people, can take from it. Their lifestyle was not perfect. It was hard. It was dangerous. It was shaped by a brutal environment and limited resources. And yet, in their relationship with rest, they achieved a harmony that many of us, with all our advancements, have lost. So how can we reinterpret Viking sleep, not as historical curiosity, but as living wisdom? The answer lies in understanding what Viking sleep represents: a return to alignment. With biology. With environment. With community. With self. Let us begin by reimagining our sleep environments, not as sterile boxes filled with gadgets, but as restorative ecosystems. The Viking longhouse, with its communal warmth, simple bedding, and firelight, reminds us that sleep begins not just in the body, but in the space around us. We may not share sleeping platforms anymore, but we can share rituals, family stories, quiet music, or shared silence. We can replace cold blue light with warm lamps, disconnect earlier, and let the room grow dark and still. Let us remember the power of natural darkness. Darkness is not a void to be feared or filled with distraction, it is the signal for melatonin to rise, for thoughts to slow, for healing to begin. The Norse embraced darkness as part of the cycle, not something to push away. In our homes, we can return to this rhythm by limiting artificial light, turning screens off before bed, and even stepping outside to feel the night sky. The body remembers. Let us revisit the flexibility of sleep timing. The modern obsession with a perfect, uninterrupted 8 hours has caused more stress than relief. The Vikings didn't count hours. They followed the sun, the season, the body's cues. They slept in segments when it suited them. They woke during the night not in panic, but in peace, using the time for quiet tasks or reflection before returning to bed. If we wake in the night, we can stop fearing it. We can read, meditate, sit with ourselves, and return to rest when the body calls. Let us honor the intelligence of the body. The Viking body moved all day, lifting, rowing, farming, crafting. This created a natural fatigue that no melatonin pill can mimic. But this wasn't punishment. It was movement tied to purpose. Modern life may be more sedentary, but we can still move, walk more, take the stairs, stretch in the morning light. Exercise, when done rhythmically and consistently, is not only good for sleep. It is part of sleep. It is sleep's invitation. Let us also rediscover the importance of meal timing and nourishment. The Vikings ate early. They feasted in celebration, but their daily meals were simple, dense in nutrients, and timed hours before bed. Digestion had time to complete before rest began. We now know that late-night eating disrupts sleep cycles and glucose levels. By returning to earlier dinners, and reducing stimulants like caffeine and sugar, we allowed the body to shift focus from processing to restoring. Let us renew our connection to herbal wisdom. In the Viking world, sleep was aided not with pharmaceutical force, but with gentle support: valerian root, hops, chamomile, honeyed infusions. These herbs, delivered with ritual and calm, signaled safety and release. Today, we can do the same. A warm mug of herbal tea, a lavender diffuser, a bath with calming oils, not as miracle cures, but as part of an environment that supports sleep, not sabotages it. Let us reframe the psychology of sleep. Viking culture held a balanced philosophy: act with courage, rest without guilt. They saw sleep not as laziness or weakness, but as necessary preparation for meaningful action. When they had wronged someone, they addressed it. When they had nothing more to do, they rested. Their honor-based culture meant fewer internal contradictions. They didn't go to bed burdened by self-doubt, procrastination, or unresolved tension. Sleep was a mirror of the day. And so it should be for us. We can learn to release performance anxiety around sleep. Not every night will be perfect. Not every dream will be pleasant. But sleep is not a test. It is a return to nature, to self, to unconscious repair. The Vikings did not track REM cycles. They trusted their bodies. And modern science now shows that this trust, this reduction in sleep anxiety, may itself improve sleep quality. We must stop fighting for sleep and start creating the conditions where sleep arrives on its own. Most importantly, we can rekindle the Viking belief in living in alignment with the world. Their entire way of life was seasonal, cyclical, adaptable. Winter brought early rest. Summer shortened sleep. Days began with sunlight and ended when the fire dimmed. There was no fight against nature, only adaptation. If we adopt a similar posture, not rigid schedules, but adaptive rhythms, we align ourselves once again with the biology we still carry in our DNA. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: sleep cannot be isolated from the rest of life. It is not a task at the end of a to-do list. It is the shadow of the day's choices, the sum of movement, light, food, mood, and meaning. The Vikings didn't sleep well because they focused on sleep. They slept well because they lived in flow with the world. This series has been a journey through time. From the dim hearths of the longhouse to the fields of modern sleep medicine, we've rediscovered truths that were never lost, only forgotten. The Vikings had no word for sleep hygiene, but they lived it. Their wisdom is not in the past, it's in the rhythm of breath, the silence of night, the letting go at day's end. As we return to our own beds, we can carry their lessons with us. We can darken our rooms, calm our thoughts, move our bodies, and forgive the day. We can let go of control. We can listen to the night. We can sleep like Vikings, not by imitating every detail, but by remembering who we are, human beings, built for rhythm, made for darkness, called to rest. So tonight, when the lights go out, take a deep breath. Feel your weight sink into the bed. Let your eyes grow heavy. And think not of screens, schedules, or statistics, but of firelight flickering across wooden beams. Of furs and straw. Of voices murmuring by the hearth. Of the deep, ancient silence of the north. In that silence, sleep awaits. Let it come. Let it carry you. As it did them,